Good afternoon and welcome to this NZIOB webinar on how to prepare construction sites for return to operations under COVID level 3. My name is Malcolm Fleming, Chief Executive of the New Zealand Institute of Building. Today's webinar has proven particularly popular. We're in excess of 350 registrations. We did run this webinar back in 2020 and certainly wish that there'd been no need to produce a sequel. But we find ourselves in a position to do so, with New Zealand going back into alert level 4 this past 2 weeks. As the majority of the country prepares to be back on site tomorrow as Auckland South drops alert level 3, the timing for this event is perfect. There are two main differences in place now than there was in 2020. The first is that a vaccine is now in existence in New Zealand, and we're well underway with the vaccination program. And the second is that the current strain of COVID-19 is much more contagious than what we were dealing with last year. It is timely, therefore, to gain familiarity with the new construction site protocols for working at alert level 3, which Construction Health and Safety New Zealand CEO, Chris Alderson, will summarise for us, and to provide some practical advice also from construction practitioners who have been working these last 2 weeks on essential services construction sites. So finding an operational vertical construction site has proved to be a little bit difficult, though find one we did, and have been very fortunate to have the project come with some terrific practitioners, including the 2018 New Zealand Building Industry Awards Supreme Award winner, Jason Carney of Hawkins, who will start that part of the presentation off. Joining Jason is Hawkins Northern Regional HSE Manager Wayne O'Brien and RCP Director James Peacock. The collective presentation has two parts. Firstly, the team's approach to operating at level 4, as they have been undertaking this past 2 weeks. And the second part is converting those lessons that they've learned and how to operate at the forthcoming alert level 3. Judging from the member queries I've already fielded, it would appear that vaccination is going to be a key issue for sites, which is something that the presenters will cover off as we go through the event. Before I pass over to Chris Alderson to get things underway, I just wanted to quickly make you aware of a construction technology themed webinar that the NZIOB will be running later on this week at 12 p.m. on Friday. It features Jed Finch, who was a winner of a $10,000 NZIOB Charitable Education Trust Scholarship in 2017. That funding helped Jed develop an innovative, recoverable and reusable construction framing system, which is now marketed in Australia under the Exit Frame brand. As I said, that webinar is on this Friday at 12 p.m. Visit the NZIOB website to find out some more details. So enjoy today's webinar. Please ask questions via the platform tools. I'll return after the two presentations to present those questions to the presenters. The first of whom we'll hear from this afternoon is Chris Alderson, who, as well as being TasNZ CEO, which is a position he's undertaken since 2018 inception of TasNZ, he's also the chair of Mates and Construction. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm, and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining. Look, I think what I'll do is really just sort of go through a little bit about just a reminder of the protocols and what they're there for, and a little bit of the changes. Obviously, this is a moving feast. Things are changing all the time. So what I'm saying today, I know is accurate, but we're always on the watch out for what's happening tomorrow with public health orders and so on and so forth in this rapidly changing situation. I might just share my screen quickly to start off with, and just remind everybody that the protocols, where they sit. So basically at the moment, they're sitting on the CHASNZ website. Now, I would like to thank, all those from industry to start off with who have contributed towards the protocols, in particular the likes of SiteSafe, CCNZ, registered master builders, certified master builders, and a lot of individuals that have actually come together to actually offer up what's practical and what's workable, and also obviously what's reflected within the public health orders and the law. So I would just remind everyone that overall where the protocols sit, obviously they're not legislation. The public health orders are the last word in everything. We did have a standard document which is available, and what the standards document says is, look, there's some basic concepts around protection for the worker within the bounds of the Health and Safety at Work Act. It does reference the protocols, and it talks about the protocols being guidance for industry. So what we see them as is really a minimum level for businesses to attain. It does also talk about the fact that, look, just don't print out the protocols and think you've done the job. Have a think about how you'd apply these to your sites, because all sites are different, all situations are different. There may be more controls that you believe are appropriate for the site, and that's fine. So it's not just a cut and paste, I guess, is the first thing. And the Hawkins guys later on will actually show you how they've taken that approach and actually have developed it. So look, we do have the protocols online. They are split between residential, more focused on the smaller businesses, in particular specialist trades that might be going into people's homes, things like that. And then the vertical and horizontal protocols, which are probably more attuned to larger sites, commercial sites, even residential commercial sites available there. Look, there's plenty of other tools and information on the website. And if you go into the COVID-19 page and the resources page, you'll find all that there. So that was the first point. There have obviously been some changes today that we're just processing, and the major change and the major difference from last year is we have an alert level 4 for the Upper North Island and the rest of New Zealand being alert level 3. So our understanding at the moment is that the protocols still apply. There is some discussion around, will people be able to travel between alert level 4 and alert level 3 for work? The long and short of it is in very, very limited circumstances. So the read we've been given from MB is that, look, there is a process for applying, but unless you've got a really, really good case, it's probably better not to apply, because they'll get overwhelmed with the projects that probably should go ahead. So the process for actually applying for any exemptions for worker travel between alert level 4 and alert level 3 are on the MB's Business Connect website. There is, I guess, another thing to consider around alert level regions around New Zealand at the moment, and that the rest of New Zealand is alert level 3. You can travel obviously within your own region, and by region what we're talking about is regional council region. So if you want to know what the regional council regions are, if you go into Local Government New Zealand, there's a couple of maps there that show that. So yes, you can travel obviously within your own region. You can also travel within an adjacent region, but what they don't want you doing is sort of hopping regions. So going to regions that aren't adjacent to yours. If you do believe you need to do that, again, you need to put your case to MB through the Business Connect website. So I guess that was just some of the changes we're just sort of processing at the moment. In terms of thinking about the protocols and the changes from last time, it's fair to say that most of the protocols for alert level 3 are still 100% good. What we've sort of learnt over the last year is that some of the things that we sort of talked about in terms of things like health checks, in terms of temperature controls, probably not really worth the effort that people have put into them. We've found out really through studies overseas that temperature checking on sites very, very, very rarely actually detects COVID positive people, and particularly with this Delta variant, because you can be symptomatic long before you ever feel sick. So the advice around that is, look, still the background advice is really communicating with your people, making sure that they're confident and you've got a good relationship with them, that they will say, look, I'm not feeling very well, therefore I'm going to stay home, is your best defence there. The other thing that we know is that, look, in terms of cleaning your site or sanitising your site, you don't need expensive equipment, UV equipment or steamers. It's really just, basic wiping down with soap and water, and that sort of thing will kill the bug. So that's good. What I guess the major thing, as Malcolm said, though, the big control that we've got now that we never had before a year ago is the vaccination side of it. Obviously, there's a lot of there's a lot of discussion around, can you make a site vaccinated workers only. I probably won't go into the legal side of that today, but look, the overall approach that we'd like people to take from a business point of view is that there's a strong emphasis for businesses to make sure their people have got access to the right information around vaccinations. So we know there's a lot of misinformation out there at the moment. Believe it or not, there's Facebook groups like Tradies Against Vaccinations and things like that. There's really good information on the government website around what vaccines are, how they've been developed, their efficacy and their efficiency and their effectiveness, what they actually do. And there's lots of nice videos on there and tons of material that I just suggest that has been referenced in the protocols for businesses to go and source, and really just to make sure their people are getting the right information. The other thing businesses can do to really promote vaccination is giving people time off work. So we want to remove whatever barriers are out there that people are feeling that they might not want to get a vaccine. So, typically it could be some practical things like I just don't know where to go, or I'm not really sure, I'm vaccine hesitant. Get them the information, or it might be I don't have the time, or I can't get there. So it's again about businesses working with their workers to make sure that all those barriers are taken away, so they've got the best access. Obviously, at the moment, vaccines haven't been widely available up until now. But we do know that it's in most places. I think from tomorrow, it's everybody can book, and then we've just got to march on with making sure that we get that done. So other things that we sort of looked at in terms of the alert level 3 protocols, face coverings came up. So we've been watching this one very carefully. Now, we know I use the word face coverings versus masks, so I'm talking about a face covering, and that they haven't been mandated for the workplace under a public health order. What the government's done is strongly recommended them. I think if we go back to our principle that the protocols are a minimum standard, we've also repeated in the protocols that they should be encouraged where appropriate, but we also recognise the fact that construction sites are complex. And often we've got other PPE in place. We've got face shields, we've got respirators, we've got all sorts of things going on. We've got people working indoors and people working outdoors. So for this one, and the Hawkins guys will talk to this a little bit more, it's around, at the very minimum, make them available if people want them, and make sure that people understand that, they are a good preventative one. Sometimes it's not appropriate to be using them in some circumstances, but look, please go through your own risk assessment, particularly if you're working indoors, if the ventilation's poor, if you've got, even though we've got social distancing in there and physical distancing, if you're working with large teams of people, then face masks are obviously a good idea. So that's what the protocols say there. Lastly, what I might just do is just show you a little bit of a tool that we sort of developed to help businesses understand the relationship between the controls. And this is something called a bow tie. And the bow tie, it's called a bow tie because it looks broadly like a bow tie with a little red bit in the middle. And what it's designed to do is think about the control layering that we achieve under different alert levels. So under alert level 1, look on the left-hand side, we've got some causes out there, some exposures to the virus during travel to work, while at work, while meeting others, from work surfaces or for aerated droplets. There's some things we can put in place to actually reduce the chance of that happening. Things like having only well workers at work, sanitising, things like that. And then on the other side, if they still get it, then obviously our emergency procedures kick in. We've got our contact tracing and again, our sanitisation to actually stop it spreading throughout our communities. What we sort of find is that as we go up through the alert levels, so alert level 2, for example, we'll find that there's more controls that get added in terms of cleaning sites and equipment. Then you get to level 3 and you'll see some more heavy controls coming in, like having only necessary workers at work, making sure that the people aren't there who don't need to be there. Things like physical distancing coming in, obviously as well. and also some of the mental health controls that we'd like to see, like, the constant comms, the leaders engaging in mental well-being, encouraging early help seeking and peer networks. And then at alert level 4, you start seeing, the essential travel and essential work only start creeping in to really try and limit the numbers. What we do know, and I'll just sort of turn the vaccine effect on here, as you'll see, and this bow tie is downloadable from the Chasn's website under the COVID-19 resources, so you can have a play yourself after this. Vaccinations work on both sides of the bow tie. They actually prevent a worker from becoming COVID-19 positive. If you go onto the government website, they've got an 88% effectiveness in actually stopping you getting the virus. And then on the other side, if you do get it, if you're one of the unlucky 12%, you still get it, or one of the people that can't be vaccinated, because there are those people as well, then what it will do is reduce the symptoms by about 96%. So you can see how the control layering sort of effect going up and down, but from a vaccines point of view, we do know that vaccines work both as a preventative and to limit the actual effects of the virus. So incredibly strong control, something that we haven't had in our toolkit up until now. And what we need to do is make the best of the tools that we've been given. The rollout, hasn't been 100% smooth. We're sort of creaking on through that, but really it's our way of avoiding future lockdowns and the big price we have to pay for those, both from a social point of view, for the education of our children, and from a financial and business point of view as well. So it's in our best interests for everybody to get behind this one. I'm sure there'll be more questions about vaccines that we're happy to take later on. But what I might do is stop there and hand over to the guys from Hawkins and RCB.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. Jason Carney. So I thought I'd just start with a bit of a background on the project itself. So the project's the upgrade of the neonatal unit for premature born babies. It's providing 28 new cot bays and support facilities for the unit. The clients, the Counties Manukau District Health Board and RCP are the project managers. And in fact, James Peacock's with us today, and we'll loop him in through some of these various slides just to give us a bit of a client perspective. So the project was deemed essential by Ministry of Health and the Counties Manukau to proceed under Alert Level 4. It will provide a lot, additional bed space for the hospital. Currently, we've got around about 20 to 25 contractors per day on site. It's fair to say when Alert Level 4 hit, it came with pretty little warning and little time to react. And the initial evening was spent sort of trading phone calls back and forth between Hawkins, RCP and the hospital to establish if it was going to proceed under Alert Level 4. And once that was established, we began notifying our immediate team and trying to put plans in place to return back to work. James, did you want to add anything from a client's point of view at that point?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have been doing on the project, even prior to the announcement on alert levels, was through the PCGs, we were actually keeping tabs and sort of tracking COVID. And then when we saw the New South Wales outbreak, we started to make sure that was on our agendas and making sure we actually had a bit of a plan in place. So even if we are dropping back to level 3 in other parts of the country, keep it on the agenda and keep yourself prepared for what might happen under other alert levels.
So I guess going back under this alert level, we had to sort of react and come up with safety plans and management plans to distribute and to get everyone back to work and working safely. So it took us around about 24 hours. We started notifying subcontractors the next morning. Unfortunately, not all the subcontractors came back straight away. It took us 2 to 3 sort of working days to get their site back up and running. And there are a number of suppliers who shut down their factories under Alert Level 4. So a couple have reopened on the basis of this project, which has been really good to see, and there's still a couple who haven't. So we're working through those challenges in a pretty collaborative sort of fashion with RCP and the client and their design consultants, just to see if there's some alternative options or different solutions. I guess, James, from the hospital's point of view, there's some key drives to get this handed over.
Yeah, I can probably talk to that. So the way in which the project is actually structured, we had to move out a number of cot beds from the space, and that's been relocated within the hospital, which in an area which they want to get back for COVID capacity in the event we need it. So there's a lot of pressure on the project to complete this fit out as quickly as possible to return those bed spaces back to the hospital so they've got some additional COVID capacity. So from a client or county's point of view, as soon as COVID level 4 was announced, one of the key things was how quickly can we get back into construction? How quickly can we know that it's safe for construction to continue? Understanding that we've got the protocols in place, minimising any downtime that we've got, and that's right through the whole supply chain. Being very clear with contractors, staff, consultants, even council about what the protocols were, so we could make sure we could pull everyone onto site and keep things moving. And really, the crux of it was clear communications. So all these documents that Hawkins prepared were really good tools for making sure that we were able to communicate with all the other people that were involved in the project. And actually, there was a no surprises approach. Everyone knew what was happening. We had lots of discussions in relation to program, supply issues, all those sorts of things. And it became a really collaborative approach to how we solved the challenges of COVID.
And very quickly, from memory. So look, starting back under the alert level 4, the key process for us is to sort of re-induct all the subcontractors and have them sign on to that induction and the swims prior to starting back on site. Really just to help focus them, as Chris was saying, around understanding what these protocols are like in relation to alert level 4, and just obviously making sure that we're keeping people safe with all the measures that we've put in place. And it's necessary for anyone coming back to our site actually to undergo this induction. And due to the stage that we're at, just over the last week, we've actually had to carry out a consultant inspection and a council inspection, both site inspections deemed necessary to sign off the works. So we've managed that as part of this process. The planning has also required us to sort of look at dedicated sort of segregation between us and the general hospital itself. So what you can see on the screen there is the access route. It's a back of house sort of delivery access, and to the south of that picture, you can sort of see where we've got dedicated subcontractor car parking, which is quite a way away from the general population. And again, that's all just to help us sort of come through the back door while everyone else is going through those other doors. So what we've got there, that's actually the entrance itself. You can see it's just mainly geared up for service and supply deliveries. Initially, we wanted to implement a one-way system, so that's where everyone would come into the entry of site, and then we'd take them out from the north, because the site itself has got a south and a north entrance as well. So typically that would have been preferable, creating a one-way system and sort of helping with the social distancing. But when we reviewed it with the hospital, the exit to the north would have created a more of a significant interface risk between the hospital staff and the patients and the construction staff. So it was discussed and agreed that the lower risk option was to just keep people coming in and out of that one way and keeping them away from the circulation of the hospital itself. What we've got there, that's the sign and register. So it's a declaration form effectively. So when people rock up to site, they're asked to tell us or declare that they're feeling okay, or whether they've got any COVID symptoms, that they're using or utilising the COVID tracing app, and declared how they travelled to work, just for that tracing that Chris mentioned earlier. We want to understand whether they've come by public transport or by car, and if they travelled with someone. So what you can see there, that's the sort of that's where people are signing in on a daily basis. See that declaration forms in that folder to the right there, next to the hand sanitizer station. can see to the left there, we've put up a couple of QR codes. So one of those QR codes is for Middlemore Hospital itself, and the other one is specific for our site. See a variation of signage there as well, just sort of reinforcing the social distancing and the wearing of the PPE. Masks are mandatory at all times under alert level 4. And as part of this regime, we've also implemented sort of twice daily cleaning regime, just cleaning all those common sort of contact or congregation areas, such as the meeting room or toilets and offices, etc. So what we've got here is an example of the social distancing. You can see there we've sort of marked out some of the just pays to mark out areas where you are going to have congregation, and also where there's queuing areas to the site itself. And there we've got that's our daily briefing forum. So that's again, that's that same area you just saw, where we've set people out in the location where they're social distance, and so that we can sort of discuss and undertake the daily sort of pre-starts and daily briefings that we run on the project. They've actually been a really important part of the process. That's where we've, just reinforce or remind people of the requirements, and also you get their feedback and any improvement or concerns that they might have. Middlemore has numerous COVID patients currently being treated there, and it's been widely reported in the media, and we've noticed a level of anxiety from subbies and from even our staff regarding this. They were hearing reports from the media before we were sort of informing them of any of those sorts of things. So again, the daily briefings provided a forum for us to address these. So look, people will just really need to understand that they're not being put at risk. And as part of that, we implemented sort of including the hospital in these briefings. So, and they're providing us daily updates on the latest developments, movements, or any potential risk of COVID-19 within the hospital. And then that allows us just to take that to the contractors forum. And again, so they're not hearing it from the media first. And it helps us just to reassure them that, that they're protected, that COVID patients are actually being cared for with strict quarantine measures in place by the hospital, and we're not putting people at risk by bringing them to the site. So what you see there is a couple. One of those, the south, the picture in the bottom there, that was the northern exit site. So we know, and the other one is just an entrance out to the one of the west corridors. So they're no longer in use. Based on the, we started out thinking when we sent in our initial plan to the hospital, we were planning to do a one-way system in and out. But as I previously mentioned, they deemed that as a greater risk, just so we didn't sort of circulate with the general population of the hospital. And that, the next picture there, that is actually the one access point in and out of the site. And again, it just leads directly to the stair to the entrance to the exit of the building at the rear, and to our sort of our site office and amenities areas. So one of the real positives that's come out of this situation is the ability to deem all our people as essential workers, and then the hospital has established a pop-up vaccination centre. You can sort of see a few of the guys there lined up. So we've worked closely with the county's Manukau to be able to implement that and to bring it to all our team. It's a walk-in facility, so no bookings necessary. We've just been sort of controlling the numbers daily to send up there, and I think we're at about 80% of people have been vaccinated now. James, from a client's point of view, do you want to comment there?
Absolutely. So obviously quite a unique situation, the fact we had a vaccination centre on site. I appreciate that most sites aren't going to have that luxury. But one of the real positive things was, from a client perspective, is actually having a workforce over 80% vaccinated. Gives counties, a high degree of certainty that we've mitigated things as best we can, and we're continuing to do that. So Hawkins got a lot of credit for pushing for this, and also for making time available for their staff and subcontractors to get in there and get vaccinated. So it was definitely viewed very positively from counties, and I'm sure other clients will be the same. If you can get your vaccination rates up on your teams, it's probably going to be seen in a pretty positive light.
Yeah, I think so. So just with the COVID testing, Hawkins policy is just in line with Ministry of Health guidelines. So if you're unwell, you've got to stay at home. If you've been a place of interest, then stay at home and get tested, and don't return until you've had a negative test. And of course, followed Ministry of Health guidelines as well. You must be in contact with them. And also, if you're a close contact or live with a close contact, equally the same. So key thing for us was to look at, how we're going to sort of control I think the biggest challenge we face is the social distancing. And you can't, it's not natural for people just to, social distance, and you're fine from time to time. It's just not natural. People sort of, constantly sort of walking and invading other space. So we've looked at all the means that we can to do to sort of control that. One being deliveries, notified ahead of time and scheduled to help with deliveries coming in and out of site. And given with our current stages of work, we've started running sort of double shifts. So we're running one starting from 6 a.m. in the morning, running till 3 p.m. and then another shift running from 3 p.m. until 9. Again, this is really just to help social distancing. We've got the state of play at the project at the moment is we've got flooring and ceiling contractors wanting to come through and start doing all their sort of works, and really running them at a different time to the other contractors makes a lot of sense. It just helps avoid interaction and getting into a situation where people, sort of working on top of each other. So look, thanks everyone. Hopefully you found that content pretty useful. So I'm going to hand over to Wayne O'Brien. He's our Northern Health and Safety Regional Manager, and he's going to take us some of the upcoming changes going into Alert Level 3.
Good, thanks Jason. Just wanted to just go over a few points that you might consider before restarting projects under COVID Alert Level 3. And looking at communication with your stakeholders is engage early where possible. Your clients, subcontractors, for instance, councils, you're going to have inspections and so forth, how they're going to be carried out, consultants and the like. Take on board feedback from stakeholders. They may have specific requirements for their building, their surroundings and so forth, their community. And that was a great example in terms of the neonatal unit, where they've got specific requirements working in a live hospital. For clarity, be detailed as possible when outlining processes and controls, so it's very clear for subcontractors, but all stakeholders on how to carry out works. Working with contractors, keep in contact with your key subbies. In most cases, there's long relationships with our key subbies, and try and understand what their capability is after a month in lockdown. Work through the process early enough to determine the alignment with your COVID management plan, government guidelines, and other subcontractor information, so that you can give them constructive feedback. Also determine will the controls required for COVID have an effect on tasks carried out on site. You might need to develop new methodologies or even delay the task to later on in the program. Also consider the amount of supervision on site. The supervisors can start to prep the workers on what to expect and ensure there's no mixed messages between the main contractor and subcontractors. Again, The photo, as Jason, it's just a repeat there, but as Jason was saying, is just a pre-start, but you see the spacing there and the face covering. Also, I'd say it's a good place to reset on controls. If you're having trouble with workers following the controls, then you can go through that in the pre-start and again, get feedback from the workforce on any issues. I would also add to that you can, on your, just whilst the project is in operation, that if controls are not being followed, if you feel the need, and it has happened a little more where we've just stopped the project and just had a toolbox just reset and just talked about the controls again. Setup of site. The government have put in a lot of effort and resources with education campaigns for the New Zealand public and therefore our workers. The themes are consistent around if you're feeling sick, stay at home, contact tracing, social distancing, hand washing, and now promoting getting vaccinated. So if those messages are echoed on site, it's going to make all the stakeholders feel a bit more comfortable about being on site. Set up the site for social distancing at entry points, hand washing areas, and consider pedestrian flows on site. Whether you can have a one-way system or you've got enough room for pedestrians to pass one another. Also important is give your projects, your teams time to set up correctly. It may be half a day ahead of when your subbies come back on site or a day ahead of when your subcontractors come on site. So back on site, verify the site is safe and ready for workers. And in Auckland, we've just had a weather event, a lot of rain, a lot of wind. So that might have changed conditions on site. Also, there might have been unauthorised people on site and that may have tampered with machinery or what have you. So just look at doing those safety checks. Look at staging of contractor arrivals. If you had 100 workers arriving all at once, potentially this could cause several issues. So just consider staggering those subbies coming back to the site. And as with level 4 with Hawkins, we do have a COVID induction for our workers when they come back on site. And consider following that and backing that up maybe in a day's time with a toolbox. It might be the full site, or you might have to stagger the toolbox talks as if you don't have space to have all the site in one area. And where possible, increase the supervision for the workers coming back to work, because most level 3 controls will take some time to get used to, or different ways of carrying out tasks may require extra supervision. So that's something to consider. So those are just a few points in terms of restarting under level 3. I'll hand you back to Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Get my video back on. Here we go. It's great. So if I look at some of the questions that are popping up, there's 3 main themes really. First one is around inductions. A couple of specific questions talking about the site register and had digital been considered. The image that you had showed a paper version. So a bit of commentary around that, also remote sign-in if that was a possibility considered, and also induction, specific inductions for the site. Jason, did you want to talk about that?
I'll start. So in terms of the paper-based sort of declaration form, I think is what they're referring to there. That's a requirement for us to record that sort of information. I don't know we've got a digital format for it at this stage. I mean, we certainly reacted quite quickly and just printed the format that we did have, but I'm not sure whether the business has got a digital platform for that. Wayne, do you know?
Yeah, we have had it on other sites, but bigger sites than that, where there's a keypad, but then you've got to maintain the keypad in terms of sanitizing the keypad or cleaning the keypad. So there's plus and minuses in terms of the paper-based or some other system.
Right.
There are a couple of options out there. In Commercial Bay last year, we used a couple of things. One of those was sign on site. So there are some apps that are actually out there, but one of the key things there is you've then got to enforce all of your subbies and things like that, getting on board with that, and then being able to access it and make sure they do actually use it. So there's a sign on site, and also Foresight was another one that I've seen being used.
And Jason, specific inductions under alert level 4 for people coming onto site?
Yeah, so we have a specific induction which just reinforces the protocols that they've got to work under the alert level 4. So it's takes about 15 minutes, and it just goes through all the protocols, the social distancing, the minimum sort of PPE, and explains to them sort of the logistics with site, and the daily sort of daily controls that we'd expect to see in place.
Yeah.
And they have to undertake that before they return back to the site. Yep.
Yeah. Another theme that's coming through, not surprisingly, is about vaccinations. So a couple of questions there. What if workers are not interested in getting vaccination or unable to get a vaccination for whatever reason, or just don't want to have one? And that being the case, what are the alternative controls that could be put in place for vaccinated workers? I can pitch that one at the project team, and then I've got a follow-on one for Chris.
I'll start that off, Wayne. So we encourage it, and we've seen it as a real positive. And most of the subs have, well, as far as I'm aware, all of them have seen it as a positive on this side anyway, and jumped to it really. Yeah, but again, we're only encouraging it. We haven't made it mandatory. Wayne?
Yeah, no, as you say, that we haven't made it mandatory. It's probably a discussion with the client and all the stakeholders in terms of a position on that. And I don't think, as I say, there's been a firm position in the building industry about non-vaccinated workers.
Yeah.
Malcolm, should I jump in here?
Yeah, I was just going to bring you in, Chris, because I see that you're on a webinar yesterday with Minter Ellison, Rudd Watts, and you're on a panel with 3 lawyers.
Yeah,
so...
and I guess I'll preface this that I am not a lawyer, and I'm no way giving anybody legal advice here. But I guess, from the state of play as I see it at the moment, obviously, the COVID-19 Delta variant sort of changed the game, and around the world, if you have a look at what's happening, places like Fiji, for example, have gone for, no jab, no job. Now you can do that if you've got a military dictatorship, I guess, in that situation, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But Australia, for example, are starting to widen their definitions of who must have a vaccine to do certain jobs. So they're widening their definitions to include health workers, and the concept's being tested, and it will be tested in New Zealand as well. I mean, there are situations in New Zealand where certain jobs require other types of vaccinations. For example, working in 3 waters, around hepatitis. Within WorkSafe itself, they do talk about a process outside of the MOQ and the border workers, where if you believe you've got a job that needs only to be done by vaccinated workers, there's a risk assessment process that you should go through, including engaging with your workers under the provisions of the Health and Safety at Work Act. So, it's a complex and evolving area. There's sort of like some views that, some sites could become, look, we need everyone to have a vaccine on the site because of certain things happening. On the site, there could be vulnerable workers there, or you could be in a high risk environment. For example, doing a project within Auckland at the moment versus doing a project across Western New Zealand, different risk scenario, right? So, all those things sort of come into play. The key thing is really to make sure that, you're having an open and honest conversation, with your team, around vaccines. You can't, obviously under the Human Rights Act, can't force anyone to undertake a medical procedure, but you can ask them, and it is legal to ask them if they've been vaccinated. They don't have to tell you. So they've also got the right not to disclose that under privacy. If you're in that situation, you probably just assume they haven't been vaccinated for that reason. So look, it's an area that's it's evolving as we speak, and I guess even the legal rules around that are probably being written as we speak as well, under this really changing environment. But watch the space, because I think we will see some changes here.
Yeah. One of the features, just perhaps going back to Hawkins, a feature of this project is that it was minimal. It's at a hospital, and they created a pop-up vaccination centre at the hospital and made that available to Hawkins and the subcontractors. Hawkins, you run a number of large projects around the country. Do you foresee there's the opportunity to have specific pop-ups for construction sites, even outside CBD areas?
I think at this stage it's really status quo in terms of following the government program in terms of vaccination. I don't think, well, speaking for Hawkins, we're not in a position to do that currently.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions here staying with Hawkins. This is a good one. Efficiency loss. This time around, working at level 4 under Delta, as opposed to working at level 4 in 2020. Have you seen any changes in efficiencies?
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit in my slides there. There's always a bit of a ripple effect, but there are probably alert level 4 is different, because alert level 4 restricts, I guess, factories opening that don't see themselves as immediate sort of supply chain or any part of a supply chain to the industry. So some of them, as I mentioned, some of them have opened and some of them haven't. So there's certainly some issues there in terms of being able to sort of deliver that product. So we're just working through with the client on that one, whether we come out in 2 weeks and then we can sort of squeeze those things in at the end, or whether we need to look at some alternative solutions, is how we're trying to deal with it. James, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think from a client point of view, we've got a pretty open mind. If there are, we've had supply chain challenges the whole year. I think most projects are getting used to understanding lead time blowouts and things like that. So I think going into it with an open mind and considering alternatives if you need to. It comes back to that open and clear communication between the contractor team and the client team. And if there's a problem, talk about it early, because it's the best way to solve it.
Yeah. Here's a question also with this focus on COVID-19 with your sites. What have been the unintended consequences for other health and safety issues that may have arisen, that have been popping up elsewhere? Has there been any examples of that?
Wayne, do you want to?
Yeah, probably one for Wayne.
Yeah. No, probably only where you've got for instance, a crew lifting a Rio bar, that there would be, you'd have workers in close proximity, so you've got to rethink how you're going to do that. So I think that's the message to, well, it's been to the Hawkins team, is do not lose sight of all the other critical risks on site. So you've just got to manage, in the end, COVID-19 is just another critical risk on site, which you have to manage with a number of critical risks on site.
Yeah. And speaking of COVID-19 specifically, do you have emergency procedures in place?
Yes, each site, just as I say, for every critical risk situation, there's an emergency procedure. So as I say, COVID's no different.
Here's another one on efficiency, Jason, from the sub-trades. Are you finding them keen to work, keen to come to alert level 4 site? Another question about their productivity, which is also linked with another one. additional costs from subs for attending or reduced hours, again, productivity. So all linked to that whole productivity from the subs on alert level 4 sites.
Yeah, initially we had to encourage a few to come back because they didn't think we should be operating under alert level 4. But we got a letter that we were able to send out from the Ministry of Health, and I guess equally we've got to demonstrate to them that we're keeping them safe. They don't want to come back if it's not safe. You know, people are scared. We saw a range of anxiety levels, so it took about 2 or 3 working days to get everyone back that we needed back. So that, I mean, there's a little bit of lost efficiency there. We've probably got a little bit of opportunity in the staggered shifts, though. You know, that could be an opportunity to gain a bit of time too. And again, the supply chain, there was a couple of factories. Well, I think all factories shut down on the day, but the following week, a couple of them reopened on the basis of the letter that we were able to send out. So there's some. I think overall, I think we'll still be in a good place. And in terms of claims on this project, no, we haven't actually had any from our subs, not at this stage. I think the alert level, the project starting back under alert level 3 will suffer more from that than we have. But I think it's salvageable. We just probably have to come up with some solutions for if this continues, the items that are at risk, what do we do? Do we make a plan with the hospital to open without those, or hand over with those, or look for something alternative? I think is the first approach that we'll look at to try and deal with that.
This is probably one for Wayne. Are you receiving pushback from clients to open up their sites going back to level 3? This is presuming that the contractor wants to go to level 3, but the client doesn't want them.
That's not normally the case. Alert level 3 is quite viable for our projects, and we don't seem to have pushback from our clients.
One for Chris. This is from me. Like, a feature of the protocols last year was the review process that you had with other countries. So I'm interested in this time round, you know, how wide did you go, and with the current updates and getting some feedback.
Yeah, well, look, we're constantly watching and scanning because obviously we could see Delta coming from a long way away. And, you know, we've got in some ways the benefit, you know, of what's been effective and not effective in the UK and the US, New South Wales. And, you know, things, for example, there's been a few questions I've just seen come up, Malcolm, around, you know, physical distancing and, you know, is it really effective under Delta? It's a really good question, because we know that, you know, we've got the standard 2 meters for everybody. You know, you can go down to 1 meter if you've got some other controls in place. But then we sort of hear things like, you know, it being transmissible, you know, by people walking into the wrong lift after someone else has got out of it, you know, a while away. So, you know, it has changed the game quite a bit. But at the end of the day, we do the best with the controls that we've got at the moment. You know, we still have to have reasonably practicable sitting in the back of our minds, and, you know, it's not practicable to have us working 8 meters away from each other. You know, we just couldn't do the work safely under that circumstance. But having said that, again, it comes back to the vaccine. You know, what does give us the most protection in all this, probably far better than physical distancing, better than a mask, is that vaccine.
Well, I've got you as well, Chris. There's a couple of questions there on the same topic. Tradies visiting residential work with residents in residence, whether that is permissible.
So look, it is permissible. It's in the residential alert level 3 protocols. We specifically talk about that. The key thing there is obviously be careful. There's 2 things. You might find that in that situation, the residents are far less keen to have you in their house anyway, so you've got to be respectful for that. So you need to have the conversation that if you are going to do the work, how are you going to do the work? And, you know, your own assessment of that situation. All residences are different. You'll have a different group of people in there. There might be some things in there that you're not very comfortable with in terms of their own behaviour or the way they're going about looking after themselves, because at the end of the day, they become part of your extended bubble. And if you're not happy with what they're doing and you don't think they're going to alter their behaviour, then you've probably got to make a call about whether you do that work or not. But, if it's all going well, what you can do obviously is make sure that they're not in the same work area as you. You'd hope they're not anyway, just for other reasons. Masks might be appropriate for them and for you, and that might be part of the agreement as well. Risk assessment absolutely is permissible, but it's again working through a structured process, communicating, with residents, and they might need some reassurance as well that you have got things in place and that you are thinking through all this stuff to actually make sure that they're going to be as safe as you are.
Great. We've got one here for Jason. Have you experienced increased levels of stress and fatigue on site, and particularly with your management teams? And how have you been monitoring and managing that process?
Look, we have noticed anxiety levels are certainly up and down, but yeah, and our staff as well. Yeah, we have noticed that, mainly around thinking that they're being put at risk. It was a bit of a common theme we got from the first few sort of briefing meetings. In terms of what we do, we are obviously running the Mates in Construction program on our sites, so we do offer that if anyone is feeling that it's getting to a tipping point. But what I've found with the briefings, that forum and being able to communicate, I think, has been the key to getting people anxieties level back down and trying to get them back to business as usual. But you certainly notice it. I think lockdown does that to people. Certainly see anxiety levels raised.
And additional to that is we've had our senior leaders checking in with the team, and so they've had that sort of feedback and assurance from our senior leaders. So just checking in with your team and just seeing how they're going as well is important.
Yeah. So while we've got you, Wayne, there was a question here. Any input from WorkSafe? Have they taken a particular interest? Because you are one of the few vertical projects working as essential work for level 4. Have they been shown an interest at all?
No, not that I'm aware of. Jason, have you heard?
No, not at all.
All right, we're into the last couple of minutes. I'd like to sort of finish these in a timely fashion. Any final thoughts from the presenters?
No, maybe just from my perspective is that obviously we've talked a lot about. Well, I've talked a lot about vaccination today. It's an evolving area. We realise that everybody hasn't been able to be vaccinated so far, mainly because of the availability and of the rollout. Look, if we've got workers out there who, in particular, are at high risk of going into people's houses, so glaziers, plumbers, electricians, fixing the roof, that kind of thing under emergency in particular, they're also classified as essential workers, so they do get bumped up the list in terms of getting their vaccine, right now. So they become under actually a number 2, I think, in terms of that. So just make sure that people confidently know that, so when they turn up and talk to the 0800 number for booking it, that they do explain their circumstances, so they make sure that they get the right prioritisation.
Hawkins and RCP?
I guess from our perspective is we've done this before. We did it last year. We got pretty good at it by the end of it. There was a lot we learned last time. It's really just a case of building on that. And last time around, there was a lot of communication in the industry, and I think that's still really important. We can still continue to learn from what's done well across sites. So I think sharing knowledge is a key way forward.
Jason?
Look, nothing really to add from me, Malcolm. Just thank you, and I think it's been important to sort of get this out there and get people's focus for alert level 3, which is hopefully coming sooner rather than later.
Well, yeah, it is for some of us. But, yeah, hopefully not too long for Auckland. Look, thank you very much. You're all very receptive when I reached out. to see if you're available to produce this webinar. As I say, judging from the attendance levels, it is information that is required by industry to put out. So thank you very much. For those members on this, there is going to be the video recording will be on your member platforms from this evening. So thank you once again, all, and we'll call that to a close bang on 5:30. Thanks very much again for your time.